What is up, everybody? It is JT Sports and back to you guys with another mock draft. This mock draft is going to be my first official mock draft of the offseason. And this is going to be a really interesting offseason because you have a lot of big name quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson who could be traded. And this offseason is starting to look really shiesty, man. I mean, teams are going to be trying to trade up in the draft to get their franchise quarterback, and also there's going to be teams out there who may trade the fan to try to land a quarterback like Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson. So before I get into it, if you are new to the channel, make sure that you guys go ahead, like the video and subscribe. I upload NFL videos and college football videos daily. Also make sure that you turn on post notifications so you get uploaded every time I upload a new video. And let's get into it. So with the first pick, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars taking Trevor Lawrence. Now, there is a rumor circulating around that some teams have Zach Wilson rated higher on their draft board than they do Trevor Lawrence. It is understandable why, because a lot of people think that Zach Wilson is the next Patrick Mahomes, which I don't really see it. I see more Deshaun Watson than Zach Wilson than I do Patrick Mahomes. And I don't think that Zach Wilson is better than Trevor Lawrence. Like, when you look at Zach Wilson, yes, he's really good, but I mean, I look at Trevor Lawrence, I mean, this guy is the best quarterback prospect maybe ever since John Elway or Andrew Luck. So if I'm the Jacksonville Jaguars, I like Zach Wilson a lot, but I just think Trevor Lawrence is the pretty obvious, unanimous #1 overall pick. Number 2, I have Zach Wilson going to the New York Jets. Now, reports out there that the New York Jets are not completely sold on trading Sam Darnold yet. Apparently, they want to scout the remaining of the quarterbacks in this draft class, do their due diligence, and then they'll decide on Sam Darnold's future. But also, if they trade for Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson, then yes, without a doubt, we will see Sam Darnold get traded. But it looks like we're not really going to see a lot of movement until near the draft when it comes to Sam Darnold's future with the Jets. But as of right now, I still would take Zach Wilson because I just think the New York Jets have a new coaching staff. You would probably like to start off with a new quarterback. I think Zach Wilson would be a really good fit for the New York Jets. Number 3, I have Devontae Smith going to the Miami Dolphins. Now, Devontae Smith was interviewed by a team. It wasn't revealed who this team was, and the team that was interviewing Devontae Smith said, "Who do you think was a better quarterback during your time at Alabama, Tua Tagovailoa or Mac Jones?" He came out and said Mac Jones. Now, I think that, of course, like the media always does, they overblow a lot of comments and they take things out of context. I don't think Devontae Smith was saying that he didn't like playing with Tua, but obviously he was trying to endorse Mac Jones. He was trying to help Mac Jones improve his draft stock. On top of that, Devontae Smith and Tua had a pretty good connection during Alabama. As a matter of fact, he caught the game-winning touchdown pass in the national championship game against Georgia a couple years ago from Tua. So I don't think Devontae Smith would ruin the chemistry with the Miami Dolphins if he was to get drafted by Miami and that he would not get along with Tua. I think he would get along with Tua perfectly fine. They asked him a question. He responded in the media, probably took it out of context. 4th overall, I have the Falcons taking Justin Fields. Now, I already made a video about why I believe the Atlanta Falcons should go ahead and draft Justin Fields. Make sure that you guys go ahead and check that out. But pretty much, I don't think that Justin Fields is ready to be a day one starter in the NFL. I think he needs to go to a team that isn't going to have to force him into a situation to start right away week 1 of the 2021 NFL season. I think Justin Fields needs to sit for a year or two, learn the playbook, learn the NFL system, and then once Matt Ryan ends up retiring and hanging up the cleats, then I feel like Justin Fields can come in and contribute and be the franchise quarterback, similar to what the Kansas City Chiefs did when they drafted Patrick Mahomes. They let Mahomes sit for a year behind Alex Smith. Then after that season, they traded away Alex Smith. And then Patrick Mahomes became the guy in Kansas City. And I think Justin Fields has a lot of potential. He runs a lot like Jalen Hurts, really similar running style to Jalen Hurts. He's not elusive in the open field like Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is more of a elusive runner. I think Justin Fields and Jalen Hurts are more powerful runners who will not hesitate to run you over if they're given the opportunity. So I think with the 4th overall pick, the Atlanta Falcons should go ahead and take Justin Fields out of Ohio State. Penny Sewell out of Oregon is regarded as the best offensive tackle in this draft class because he is a true swing tackle. He can play left tackle and right tackle at a very high level. And for the Cincinnati Bengals, without a doubt, this is a no-brainer right here. You need to protect Joe Burrow. You saw what happened when Andy Dalton didn't have any protection. Andy Dalton, once upon a time, was a pretty good quarterback. But over the course of time, Cincinnati's offensive line started to get worse. Andy Dalton started to get worse. So if that's not an indication about how important the offensive line is, look at what happened to Joe Burrow this past year. He got injured because of the offensive line. Now, give to understand that injuries happen, but if the Cincinnati Bengals took it upon themselves to add some more pieces on the offensive line this offseason, I believe Joe Burrow's chances of getting injured would have went a little bit down the drain, or his chances of getting injured would have been a lot lower if he had a better offensive line compared to the offensive line that he had blocking for him this year. So you draft Penny Sewell, you pair him up with Jonah Williams. I think you're going to have a pretty good starting spot when it comes to improving the offensive line because you're going to have your two offensive tackle spots taken care of. With the 6th overall selection, I have Philadelphia taking wide receiver Jamar Chase. Now, in the mock draft that I made a couple of weeks ago, after the wild card round, I had Philadelphia taking Kyle Pitts. I think wide receiver would probably be more of a use, even though Kyle Pitts would be a pretty good fit because they're going to trade Zach Ertz away and they have a pretty big gaping hole there. But they do have Dallas Goedert there, so he could be a pretty good replacement for Zach Ertz as well. So I think they need to go receiver, give Jalen Hurts some more weapons on the outside because they pretty much don't have anybody. You have Jalen Reagor, who, I mean, he showed flashes one game against Green Bay, but for the most part, it looks like they kind of missed with the Jalen Reagor pick. Then you have Greg Ward Jr. Okay, he's pretty decent. He's probably their most consistent wide receiver that they have on the roster, but Jamar Chase is probably arguably the best wide receiver in this draft class, depending on who you ask. It's either Devontae Smith or Jamar Chase. I think it's 1A and 1B. I both think these are two of the best wide receivers in this draft class, and I think with Jamar Chase, he would be a really good fit with Philadelphia because he pretty much can do everything. He can run the routes underneath. He can also be a really good deep threat as well. He can do everything. So I think Philadelphia with the 6th overall pick, I think they should take Jamar Chase, the wide receiver out of LSU. With the 7th pick, I have the Detroit Lions taking linebacker Xavier Collins out of Tulsa. Now, Michael Parsons is the most popular pick going to the Detroit Lions, but after watching a lot of Xavier Collins film, I love Xavier Collins' game. I think that he is worth the top 10 pick, and I think he's better than Michael Parsons because he's way better in coverage than Michael Parsons. On top of that, he can do everything. He can come off the edge and rush as a blitzer. You can send him up the front as a blitzer. I mean, this guy is really incredible when it comes to utilize him in certain blitzing formations and blitzing situations. This guy's a really good linebacker when it comes to blitzing the quarterback. He also is really good in coverage. But the thing that I love the most about Xavier Collins is that he is a very smart football player. When you see Xavier Collins play, his football IQ flashes every single game he plays in. Like, he makes great football plays. He is a great football player. He's always around the ball. Even when the play is over and he isn't in on a tackle, he's around the area. This guy has a nose for the football. He reminds me a lot of Luke Kuechly when Luke Kuechly was coming out of Boston College. That's who Xavier Collins reminds me of. He's just a complete linebacker. And listen, I understand people think Michael Parsons is the best defensive player in this draft class. I just like Xavier Collins' game more than I like Michael Parsons. And I know a lot of Lions fans are probably going to disagree with that, but if you watch Xavier Collins play, which I doubt a good amount of you guys watch this mock draft have even seen Xavier Collins play because he plays for Tulsa. Nobody's jumping out of their TV screen to watch Tulsa play. So if you haven't watched Xavier Collins film, go and watch a couple of games of Xavier Collins film when he was playing for Tulsa this year, because this dude is the real deal. I think without a doubt he is the best linebacker in this draft class. Now, with the 8th overall selection, I have Trey Lance going to the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers look like they're going all in on trying to find their franchise quarterback of the future, whether that be Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson. Carolina's drafting or they're getting a new quarterback this offseason. Now, the thing about Trey Lance is I don't really know if Trey Lance is a day one starter. Now, he is a pretty good decision maker. You do have to give him that, because this dude went a whole entire FCS season without throwing a single interception. I don't care if you play D5, D4, JUCO, NAIA. To go a whole entire season without throwing an interception is extremely impressive. That means you are really good when it comes to making decisions with the football. And Trey Lance also has really good size as well. He has good athleticism and a really good arm. I think Trey Lance has a lot of potential to end up being the best quarterback in this draft class. I think Carolina would be a perfect place for him, because you have a really good coaching staff. You have one of the best offensive coordinators in the game in Joe Brady. He may not be able to start right away, but he could end up starting over Teddy Bridgewater during the middle of the season, or come the worst case scenario, the 2022 season. But I do think Trey Lance is a really good fit for the Carolina Panthers. Justin Fields will also be a pretty good fit for Carolina, but obviously he's already off the board. Trey Lance will probably be the next best option at this point. 9th overall, I have the Denver Broncos taking cornerback Patrick Surtain out of Alabama. I think Patrick Surtain is the best cornerback in this draft class. 10th overall, I have the Dallas Cowboys taking cornerback Caleb Farley out of Virginia Tech. I think he fits the scheme really well in Dallas, because this guy is a really good press man-to-man corner. Same thing with Trayvon Diggs that they also have, who had a really good rookie season as well for Dallas. And Dallas, they need a lot of help in that secondary. They had one of the worst secondaries, if not the worst secondary in the NFL. So you add Caleb Farley and you pair him up with Trayvon Diggs, then I think you're going to end up having one of the better cornerback tandems in the NFL. I have the New York Giants with the 11th overall selection taking wide receiver Jalen Waddle out of Alabama. Now, I'm going to be real with you. I think Jalen Waddle is a little bit overrated. And the reason why I say Jalen Waddle is overrated is because, I mean, yes, he's really fast. He's really good in the open field. The NFL is all about speed. It's all about trying to find a nice Tyreek Hill. But Jalen Waddle just isn't as polished enough for me to be a number one wide receiver for the New York Giants. I don't think he could give the New York Giants what they really need right now, because really what I think Jalen Waddle is a really good deep threat. He hasn't really showed me that he can run the underneath routes, and that's what they really need. But I do think that Darius Slayton does have that potential to be that number one guy. So you give Darius Slayton another wide receiver who can complement him, I think that could be a really good fit. So I think Jalen Waddle could be the good number 2 with the New York Giants, and Darius Slayton could take over as that number one wide receiver role. But I do think Jalen Waddle would probably be the more ideal pick here, because he's the best receiver on the board. He does have the potential to be a good all-around wide receiver. It's just that I think it's going to take a year or two, and we're not really going to see Jalen Waddle pop like that. 12th overall, I have the 49ers taking off the tackle Rashawn Slater out of Northwestern University. I think Rashawn Slater is the second best offensive tackle in this draft class, but you can make the argument that he is just as good as Penny Sewell, because Rashawn Slater was a stud on that Northwestern offensive line. And when you look at the 49ers, you have Trent Williams, who is most likely going to end up hitting free agency. They may not be able to bring him back. So the next best thing would be able to go ahead and draft Rashawn Slater. On top of that, he'll be younger, which means you don't have to dish out all that big money like if you were to try to retain Trent Williams. So I think Rashawn Slater would be a good pick for the 49ers with the 12th overall selection. I also have the third offensive tackle coming off the board, Christian Darrisaw out of Virginia Tech. The Chargers drastically need to improve the offensive line. This offense has potential to be the best offense in the NFL, but what they do need to do is ensure the offensive line. Now, they have been linked to the Baltimore Ravens when it comes to trading for Pro Bowl caliber offensive tackle Orlando Brown, but if they don't get Orlando Brown, then I think Christian Darrisaw would probably be the obvious pick at this point in the draft, because without any doubt, their biggest need right now heading into this year's offseason and heading into free agency is offensive line. Now, you could probably go interior or you can go off the tackle, but I think every team needs to start out by making sure that the offensive tackle position is straight. I think center is really important, but I think offensive tackle is just as important, because you want to be able to protect your quarterback coming off the edge from those edge rushers. And I think Christian Darrisaw will be a really good fit with the LA Chargers. 14th overall, I have Minnesota selecting offensive tackle / offensive guard Elijah Vera Tucker out of the University of Southern California, USC. Minnesota's offensive line had some issues this year as well. I think Vera Tucker would be a really good piece there. I have Kyle Pitts going to the Patriots with the 15th overall selection. You probably could go quarterback here with Mac Jones, but I think the Patriots are probably going to want to opt for a veteran quarterback, and Kyle Pitts would be the ideal pick here because tight end, like we saw last year, is a really important part of that New England Patriots offense. So you get Kyle Pitts. You can do a lot with Kyle Pitts. I think Josh McDaniels will love the versatility that Kyle Pitts brings because you can line him not just at tight end, but you can also line him in the slot. You can line him outside, similar to how the Patriots used to use Rock Gronkowski, similar to how Kansas City uses Travis Kelce. As a matter of fact, Kyle Pitts reminds me a lot like Travis Kelce. That's my comparison for him. You have a good amount of people who are comparing Kyle Pitts to Darren Waller, but I think Kyle Pitts is a way better athlete than Darren Waller. So I think that Kyle Pitts going to the Patriots would be a match made in heaven. 16th overall, I have Arizona taking edge rusher Gregory Rousseau out of the University of Miami. Now, I think that this is a really weak edge rusher class. There's not really any dominant pass rushers in this year's draft class like a Chase Young or Nick Bosa coming out. Like, it's not really, you don't really have that guy. You have a lot of guys who have potential, but I mean, Gregory Rousseau has a lot of potential, but he doesn't have a lot of experience. He only played pretty much 1 year that he had a really outstanding season, and then on top of that, he's really raw. He doesn't have a lot of pass rushing moves. He reminds me a lot of Vic Beasley. Like, you're hoping that he's able to live up to his potential because of the frame and the athleticism that he has, but I'm just not all that high on the pass rushers in this draft class. But I think Gregory Rousseau to Arizona would be a really good fit because we don't know if they're going to be able to retain Hassan Reddick, and there are rumors that they may shop Chandler Jones, even though those rumors were turned down a couple of days ago. 17th overall, I have Kwity Paye going to the Las Vegas Raiders. The Las Vegas Raiders secondary is a mess. You could either go corner or you could go pass rusher here, but I think for the Raiders, the pass rush would be a lot better because I think the young cornerbacks that they have on the roster could start to improve going in to next year. I think really what they need is a pass rusher because if you have a good pass rush, you help out your secondary because your corners aren't going to be left on islands for the whole entire duration of the play, because if you have a pass rush that's able to hit home, that means the cornerbacks are going to be stuck in coverage for less longer compared to a team that has a bad pass rush that doesn't have a good defensive line. So Kwity Paye would be a pretty good fit there. I have Najee Harris going to the Miami Dolphins with the 18th overall selection. They need a running back. Najee Harris reminds me a lot of Le'Veon Bell. He's a very patient runner. He's very good catching the ball out of the backfield. I think he'll be a really good fit there down in Miami. With the 19th overall pick, I have Washington selecting wide receiver Kadarius Toney. Now, you probably could go quarterback with Mac Jones here, but I think wide receiver will probably be a bigger need because you need to give Terry McLaurin another wide receiver to complement him. So now the defense just isn't strictly forcing all their attention on Terry McLaurin because Terry McLaurin is a stud. In my opinion, he has quickly ascended to being a top 10 wide receiver in the league. And yes, I am being a little bit biased because Terry McLaurin is my favorite wide receiver in the NFL right now. But if you give Kadarius Toney to Ron Rivera, okay, he reminds me a lot of he's like a blend of Tyreek Hill and probably a blend of, Justin Jefferson, in my opinion, because he is a really good route runner. He's a better route runner than what a lot of people give him credit for. And he's also really good with the ball in his hands as well. So you can move him to outside. You can move him to slot as well. But if you give that Washington offense another weapon to go alongside Antonio Gibson and Terry McLaurin, that is going to be a really formidable offense that Washington is going to have. I think Kadarius Toney would be a really good fit. He had a really good Senior Bowl week. He was pretty much unguardable in one-on-one drills. I really like Kadarius Toney a lot. This guy is a guy who all you really have to do is give him the ball in space and let him work. I have the Chicago Bears taking Mac Jones with the 20th overall pick. Mac Jones to Chicago, I think is a pretty good fit. Chicago doesn't really have a quarterback right now. They're interested in Russell Wilson. They also have been a little bit linked to the Deshaun Watson trade rumors, but I just don't think that Chicago has enough to be able to make a proper Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson trade compared to teams like the New York Jets, the Miami Dolphins, and the Carolina Panthers. So I think the next best thing would be to take Mac Jones. And at this point, you need a quarterback right now. You couldn't pass on Mac Jones. I think Mac Jones is really underrated, and I think he is the most overhated player in this year's draft class. Like, people hate on Mac Jones, I feel, just because he can't run with the football. He doesn't have a lot of athleticism, which is true, but he's really accurate. And on top of that, it's not like he can't run at all. Like, he has enough athleticism to extend the play or to pick up 4 or 5 yards if need be. But I think he'll be a really good fit in Chicago because, for one thing, he's more accurate than Nick Foles and Mitchell Trubisky. He doesn't have the strongest arm, but his arm strength is pretty above average. I think he's like a less athletic version of Joe Burrow. I think he'll be a really good fit with the Chicago Bears. When you look at the talent that Chicago has, I mean, really, if we're being honest, if they had a better quarterback than Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles, they probably could be a 10-11 win team. So I think Mac Jones is a really good fit for the Chicago Bears. I have Rondale Moore, the wide receiver out of Purdue, going to Indianapolis with the 21st selection. Indianapolis wide receiving core is really, really thin. T.Y. Hilton is set to be an unrestricted free agent. We don't know if he's going to be able to return. He also didn't really have all that much production until the end of last year. So pretty much your best wide receiver that you have is Paris Campbell. Then you got Zach Pascal. Then you're going to have Paris Campbell coming back. So, I mean, you have Michael Pittman, who's probably going to be your number one, but you're going to need some more targets for newly acquired quarterback Carson Wentz. I think Rondale Moore is really good. He's similar to Kadarius Toney, but the difference between Rondale Moore and Kadarius Toney is that you don't really have the injury concerns with Kadarius Toney like you do Rondale Moore. As a matter of fact, I think they're two similar players. I think they possess similar skill sets, but for Rondale Moore, pair him up with that young wide receiving core that they have. If they're able to retain T.Y. Hilton, that would be a bonus. But I think Rondale Moore would be a really good piece in Indianapolis. 22nd overall, half edge rusher Jalen Phillips out of the University of Miami going to Tennessee. Pass rush was severely lacking last year in Tennessee. They couldn't get off the field on third down. A large reason for that was because they did not have a pass rush. And the whole entire Tennessee Titans defense just severely underperformed last year. I think Jalen Phillips probably is the most safest edge rusher in this draft class because he's polished. On top of that, you have production there. He has good tape, and he's pretty good in everything else, every single category. I think Jalen Phillips could come in right away and give the Tennessee Titans 6 or 7 sacks as a rookie. I have the New York Jets taking Samuel Cosmi off the tackle out of Texas with a 23rd overall selection. Okay, you take your quarterback in the future in Zach Wilson. Now you need to protect him. You pair Samuel Cosmi up with offensive tackle that they drafted last year, Mekhi Becton, then you have a really good offensive line. Because for the New York Jets, really, if you're able to secure your 2 tackle spots and you're able to add a couple of marquee free agents like Joe Thuney in free agency, you can quickly go from one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL to one of the better offensive lines in the NFL with just a snap of a finger. I think Samuel Cosmi is a really good player. I think he's also really underrated as well. 24th overall, I have another offensive lineman going on the board. Alex Leatherwood going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Is either a halfback or offensive lineman at this point. I think Alex Leatherwood will be a really good fit because of his versatility. He is really big, but he's a really good offensive tackle. He has really good feet, but the biggest question with him is that the fact that he's so massive, is he going to be able to be quick enough to keep up with some of the faster edge rushers in the NFL? The similar question that people had about Mekhi Becton last year in the draft is the same questions people pretty much have when it comes to Alex Leatherwood. But if he struggles at tackle, then Pittsburgh can move him out to guard. I think he will be a must-have for Pittsburgh because you can get a running back in the 2nd and 3rd round. If you have a good offensive line, then it doesn't really matter who you have back there at halfback. So I think improving the offensive line is a bigger need than trying to improve the running back position as of right now because there's so much depth. You can get a good halfback in the later rounds of the draft. I have the Jacksonville Jaguars taking cornerback J.C. Horns out of South Carolina. C.J. Henderson was pretty much the best rookie cornerback last year, but that was when he was on the field because he did battle with injuries last year, and we knew that the Jacksonville Jaguars secondary was probably the worst secondary in the NFL, so without a doubt, it's a no-brainer that they must take a cornerback here. I have Michael Parsons going to the Cleveland Browns with the 26th overall selection. I think Michael Parsons falls because he didn't play last year. On top of that, you have the character concerns. Like, I could really see Michael Parsons fall into the Cleveland Browns with a 26th overall selection. I have Rashard Bateman going to the Baltimore Ravens with the 27th overall selection. I think that this is a match made in heaven because Rashard Bateman is one of the more bigger physical wide receivers in this draft class. And you look at Baltimore, they've been trying to find that physical, big body wide receiver for the last couple of years now. Now, you have Hollywood Brown, so you really just need a Batman to complement Hollywood Brown, because I said this and I'm saying it again, Hollywood Brown isn't a true number one wide receiver. He is a Robin, not a Batman. So you bring in Rashard Bateman and pair him up with Hollywood Brown, then that takes the load off Hollywood Brown, because now Rashard Bateman can run the underneath routes and do the dirty work in the middle of the field, and then you have Marquise Brown, who's taking the top off the defense over the top. I have Eric Stokes going to the New Orleans Saints with the 28th overall selection, cornerback out of Georgia. Eric Stokes is a really good corner. Some people have him going in the middle of round 2. I think that he is a late first round selection. I think he will be a pretty good fit there because with New Orleans, maybe they do trade Marshawn Lattimore because they are trying to free up a lot of cap space. And on top of that, I think they do need some additional help in the secondary because I think their front seven is pretty good. I think they're pretty solid at linebacker, and I think they're pretty solid up front. Well, they're really good up front as well. 29th, I have the Green Bay Packers selecting wide receiver Terrence Marshall out of LSU. I like Terrence Marshall a lot. The Green Bay needs to give Aaron Rodgers some playmakers. They need another wide receiver aside from Devontae Adams. Yes, you have Allen Lazard. Yes, you have MVS. But I think Terrence Marshall has way more upside, and I think he will be better right away than guys like Allen Lazard and Marquise Valdez-Scantling. And I think Terrence Marshall, one thing that a lot of people aren't saying about Terrence Marshall is how good he actually is, because if Terrence Marshall played on any other team in college football, he probably would be their number one wide receiver. Like, this was the third option on the LSU championship team that had Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. He's that good. He gets really overlooked because he was overshadowed with how good Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson were, but Terrence Marshall is just as good as his fellow cohorts that he was playing with on that LSU national championship team. I have linebacker Nick Bolton going to the Buffalo Bills with the 30th overall selection. The Buffalo Bills are going to have to let Matt Milano walk in free agency because they simply don't have enough cap space to afford giving him a new contract. So you're going to have to end up replacing him with linebacker Nick Bolton, which probably would be the best linebacker available at this point of the draft. With the last 2 picks, I have the Kansas City Chiefs taking the offensive tackle Jalen Mayfield out of Michigan, and I have Dylan Moses going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Dylan Moses was a guy who really disappointed me this year because I feel like Dylan Moses was a top 15 player. And I mean, he wasn't bad. He still, to me, is a first round linebacker, but his coverage skills weren't as good as what I thought they were. That got exposed in Florida, in that Florida game, in the SEC championship game. But I do think if Tampa was to let Levante David walk away, then I think Dylan Moses will be a really good pickup there because he's not terrible. Like, he's pretty solid. It's just that he had a pretty down year at Alabama at times, but I think you look at the pieces that he's going to have on that defense and Temple of how good that defensive line is. On top of that, you're going to be a long slide of Devin White, who is coming one of the best linebackers in the NFL. You got a pretty good secondary. So, I mean, he's going to have all the pieces to be successful in Tampa Bay. So, this is it for my first official offseason mock draft. Let me know what you guys think about it down in the comment section down below. Make sure that you